All right, we're going to talk about the raid on former President Trump's house because a judge rejected the Justice Department's efforts to keep an affidavit under seal. Now, this is interesting because it does seem like the judge in this case wants us, the public, to have more information about this case than the Justice Department does. I think that's interesting because there is obviously a public benefit to us all understanding why this was done to one of our leaders, right? It's unprecedented raid on a former leader's house, very emotionally charged. Will it help if we understand it better? The judge in this case does seem to think there is some merit in that. So we're going to walk through his opinion. This is the judge, Magistrate Bruce Reinhart. He filed his order on the motion to unseal the documents on Monday. This was heard in courts late last week. The motion was filed by what he calls, it's funny, the interveners. These are lawyers for all the major American media companies, including NBC, CBS, ABC, the Associated Press, Washington Post, New York Times, and many media conglomerates. Now, his order says that the interveners were arguing that they should get access to this affidavit because it contains, among other critically important and detailed investigative facts. We can put this on the screen if you will, Philip. He says, as the court is aware from its review of the affidavit, it contains, among other critically important and detailed investigative facts, highly sensitive information about witnesses, including witnesses interviewed by the government, specific investigative techniques, and information required by law to be kept under seal pursuant to Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure, blah, 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 blah. So what's interesting here, these are the things that they are protecting, right? The government is saying we need to not only protect these witnesses who participated, but also these techniques. I'm specifically interested in these techniques part, right? Especially since there's been speculation that perhaps there was someone implanted inside his team, or perhaps there was speculation that there was an informant
right,
who was on Secret Service. Is that allowed? We didn't know that before. What other techniques are we talking about? It's not like a bug in a telephone, clearly, right? It's something more than that. So there's something that we should not know that the Justice Department uses to collect information. Okay.
So then this is where, conspiratorially you could say, well, come on. Now, what sort of government overreach techniques are they using here? Some things that are, not warranted, not given by a warrant, things that are, the government doesn't want us to know about in general.
Or even like a 0 day in his phone. Can you plant software in the phone of a former head of state, right? If
Right.
they are a target of an investigation. This would create, I want to speculate, a constitutional crisis over what you can do, right? So these are interesting. This is an interesting, let's put a pin in that because it creates more questions than it answers. Now, the judge even hints that even if, actually the Justice Department and the judge both agree that even if they don't name the people involved with these techniques or these investigations or these witnesses, then the sleuthy internet would figure it out anyway.
Someone in our chat says, would it be maybe tickle torture?
Is that a technique that we didn't know about?
That would work on you.
Absolutely, it would.
I was like, okay, you're going to tell me the truth and I'm going to tickle your knee.
Yeah.
I
would be useless to that kind of torture.
That kind of torture.
So the motion says that given the public notoriety and controversy about this search, it's likely that even witnesses who are not expressly named in the affidavit would be quickly and broadly identified over social media and other communication channels, which would lead to them being harassed and intimidated. Also, he talks about how people who are not going to be charged with anything would suffer irreparable reputational damage for going along with this or being a witness to this investigation, which that makes me think, is it a famous person? Is it someone we already know in this cast of characters, right? Is it
Ghislaine Maxwell?
Or I don't know, like family member? Is it that juicy? Who knows, right? Because it says that they would quickly and broadly be identified, even if we redact their name because of their role. right?
Well, of course, a lot of the speculation was that Jared Kushner, right? Like,
right.
And that was the early speculation.
That's what the chat room's ringing in about.
Kushner.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I was about to say. It's like maybe son-in-law would have to be written in there, and they could redact the name, but then it would say son-in-law, and that kind of narrows it down.
Yeah. Who regularly uses the pool and the gym, right?
Who always leaves dirty socks in this room. Like, I know it was him, right? Someone saying maybe it was Giuliani. Who knows? But that was definitely one of the speculative pieces was Jared Kushner.
Right. So the judge acknowledges that these are all of these arguments, right, for keeping information sealed. But he says it weighs heavily that unsealing the affidavit would promote public understanding of historically significant events, meaning he thinks you and I, Americans, citizens of the world, do have the right to understand something important, right? So this is a case of like a judge giving us the benefit of the doubt that we need to understand something in order to, I don't know. Of course, because Trump supporters have taken this very personally, because FBI agents have been under threat. If there is something legitimate to understand here, it would be healing for all of us, perhaps. Right? He strongly hints that there is something here valid that we all need to understand, which is why he does want us to see at least part of this. He says, having carefully reviewed the affidavit before signing the warrant, I was and am satisfied that the facts sworn by the affiant are reliable. So he's telling us there's something here that I want the public to see because I think it will be educational for the public, right? So then he gives this warrant. He says, I therefore reject the government's argument that the present record justifies keeping the entire affidavit under seal. So he says no. In its response, the government has asked that I give it an opportunity to propose redactions if I decline to seal the entire affidavit. I grant that request, and I gave the government a deadline of noon on Thursday. So that's this Thursday. They have to get their black highlighter in there and go through the affidavit and propose those to the judge. So that's interesting because the Justice Department said, look, we can't even give you this redacted. It would just basically make the whole affidavit black, null and void. Also, they also tried to argue that it would set a precedence against like unsealing things and having the burden of redacting things. And he says, I reject that. We don't just investigate presidents all the time. You can make a special case and like go in there and redact some things, like give it a try. Put some elbow grease in. If I don't like it, then I'm going to say you can't redact these things or you can redact these things. And so they're going to go back and forth. The judge most likely will push back because my argument, they'll probably give them a document that looks like this, all black, right?
Right.
I mean, like, here you go. And he's like, not going to fly. So they probably will go back and forth. Go ahead.
It's funny to me that the government is suddenly arguing that they have a problem with redacting an entire document. Right.
Yes.
Like when we saw the Mueller report, I'm pretty sure they redacted half the title of the damn thing.
Yes.
So it's like they don't have any problem giving us a completely black document. Come on.
Yes.
That's the name of our show for a reason.
Yeah.
The reason our show's name is Redacted.
The burden of proof one was pretty funny, and he was like, "No, this is not. This is not going to set a precedence that it will be too hard for you to do this. You can go give it a try. Just try. You have until Thursday." So that opinion was released today. I don't think we will see anything on Thursday that the judge will look at it and be like, acceptable, publish, right? But at least we have someone who is working inside the justice system, a judge here who says, the public needs to see this. We're not just going to go around with your secretive, do what you want. If you're going to do this to a former president, the public is owed some answers. So let's give them some because there's something there for him to see. It's not something like let's insult their intelligence. They're too stupid to handle it, right? There's something there. They want to give us.
But he also...
I know what it's all about.
You do?
I was just going to say, you're going to get all of this that they went through and ransacked Melania's closet and everything. And at the end of this, they're just going to come out and they say, we can finally confirm it is a toupee.
It's not a toupee. I've told you this many times.
No, but he got a new haircut
It's
too.
a cowlick.
It's a comb over.
It's neither of those things. It's a cowlick.
I think that's the speculation. We're all speculating that's true, but they're going to be like, no, we found an extra one in Melania's closet in her Coach bag.
No,
what I want to
I'm
know,
telling you, it's a cowlick.
Well, why didn't this guy recuse himself? Like this judge? That's what I want to know. Like he's made anti-Trump. His posts have been anti-Trump. They're public, right? So you make. He should have looked at this and said, okay, my opinion of Trump is this. I shouldn't have said those things. I'm going to recuse myself. I'm not the right one to do this. I'm not the right one to sign off on this. Also knowing his past with ties loosely or tighter, we don't know, with Jeffrey Epstein, President Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, traveling on planes, visiting him, who knows the level of, so he should have recused himself. I think this is finding a judge who has no connection or does not have social media posts where he's ranting about President Trump.
Yeah.
Just a suggestion.
I don't know, but it's possible that he is then going to lean more towards public transparency because he wants there to be no question of the fact that there was something there to go look for. This is what he is telling us, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Whether we believe it or not, but this is what he's saying.
It's a good point. So maybe because he didn't recuse himself, now he's trying to make up for it by leaning more into it.
Right. Which means then we would get more answers than we would have otherwise, right? They could have had a completely different judge who says, government doesn't want you to see this. I'm on the side of the government, right? He did actually, if you read the 13-page opinion, which I did, he really does sort of take point by point the government's arguments against unsealing this, and take them to task based on what is the public right to know, what is in the public interest, and how can we protect people? Because I do think that the Justice Department tries to keep people out of public discussions if they will not have their day in court. That was a big piece of the Mueller investigation that I think they did a great job with, that they try not to impugn somebody who will not have their day in court, which again gives us the impression that the president just might. Who knows? Yeah.
And then, the thing that bothers me about this too, it's like, I think we try to cover on this show is like, it all feels like such a distraction from the bigger story right now, which is that most Americans, the biggest story that most Americans are paying attention to right now is inflation.
Yes.
In the United States specifically. And I mean, in Europe, look at what's happening in Europe. And these are the big stories. And, the media, of course, wall-to-wall coverage of this on CNN.
Yes.
Right. MSNBC, this is the total. And then they put out a friggin' poll about is America going in the right direction or not? And 75% say that America's best days are behind it. Best days behind it now. Of course.
Okay. But that's one thing, but.
Yeah, it is one thing.
I don't know. But, and then something I was reading for tomorrow's newsletter is that 55% of Americans think that China is an enemy of the state. Right. And so are gunning for another enemy. I don't know. But
so
I
that
think
means the propaganda machine needs to work harder.
Sure.
55% is not enough. They need to really crank it up.
But I think that there needs to be, if this is a legitimate investigation, there needs to be people who understand how personally half of, so many voters will take this because they feel that Donald Trump was the only one who spoke for their belief system, right? And how hard, and I think that there does seem to be some kind of understanding about that. What's interesting about this case also is that based on this motion to unseal the documents, the Trump legal team didn't get involved. They didn't make a case to unseal or not to. They just didn't show up for these hearings. They're kind of like, whatever. There was no representation of the Trump team at all.
Why do you think that is? That they already know and that it's bad? And they don't want to...
No, because I think that they would make an argument to keep it sealed if they didn't want the public to see. They continue to say, we want the public to see everything because they feel like it's a witch hunt, right? And so for them to just sort of let the media companies... I mean, it's kind of getting free representation, right? If that's what they want, if they want it unsealed, and they're not fighting to keep it sealed. They're not fighting at all.
Meanwhile, President Trump is mounting his biggest war chest ever. and throwing everything he can at this. And, again, this could be the thing. If he wasn't going to run, this is going to be the reason he does run in 2024.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Democrats may have just sealed their fate with this. We'll see.